Greetings. This is Dr. Seth Ward with a very brief introduction to the Baha'i religion and a little bit of its history and practices. The precursor to the Baha'i religion was a movement led by Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi, who died in 1850. He was among the followers of Shaykh Ahmad, and he and his followers and many others in those days thought that they would be able to identify the Mahdi, the promised deliverer, or the 12th Imam of the 12 Shia movement. There are a number of such movements in Persia in the late 1700s and early 1800s. In 1844, Shirazi declared himself to be the Bab, or the gate or the doorway to the Qa'im, and he was recognized by Mullah Hussein. He proclaimed himself at the pilgrimage of Mecca, and his movement did not last very long thereafter. Mecca was in Ottoman control at that time. He was imprisoned there, and he canceled the Sharia in the 1840s, and he was executed in 1850. He was buried originally in Persia, but in 1909, the Baha'i movement reinterred his remains in their very beautiful area in Haifa. One of his followers was Mirza Hussein Ali Nuri, who had a spiritual experience in 1852, shortly after the execution of the Bab. He was banished to Iraq. Iraq was under Ottoman control, and the followers of the Bab basically followed him as well. In 1862, he reported that he had a transforming mystical experience. He then called himself Baha'u'llah, the glory of God, and he was now calling himself a prophet, and he began to write his mystical revelations. He was moved by the Ottomans to Istanbul in 1863 and banished to Acre in what today is the State of Israel in 1868. He lived in a mansion right outside Acre and wrote the Kitab-i Aqdas, the Holy Book, and he died in 1892. He's buried on the grounds of the mansion where he lived. Begun during his lifetime. His son was called Abdul-Baha, and he was the leader of the movement during his father's lifetime and afterwards. The grandson of Abdul-Baha was really the next important leader. He died in 1957, and Shoghi Effendi, or Shoghi Effendi Rabbani, really transformed the movement into its modern religious plan as it was today. He appointed leaders who helped establish the Universal House of Justice, which had been mandated by the Baha'u'llah, but never really had happened. The first elections were only held after the death of Shoghi Effendi, and this is one of the few things that is gender-specific in Baha'i, the only exception to egalitarianism in the Baha'i religion. What do Baha'is believe? Well, they teach the unity of the human race, the unity of all religions, the truth of all messengers. Of course, they believe that the Baha'u'llah was a prophet. They believe that the human experience witnesses a gradual unfolding of peace and justice and unity, and they talk about the harmony of religion and science. Equality of men and women and the lack of prejudice is very important to the Baha'i faith, and in fact, this is one of the main reasons that people in Western country are attracted to it. It's egalitarianism, it's welcoming, it's acceptance of all people and all faith. They also believe in compulsory education, in science, in the use of some sort of universal language. They believe in the importance of beauty and tranquility, as you can see from their gardens and the large locations where they have one on each continent. such as the center in Haifa, but also there's a center in Delhi, a center in Australia, a center in suburban Chicago, and so on and so forth. Shoghi Effendi wrote an important summary of the faith, which I have reproduced on this slide. It's worth reading. The emphasis comes from the source from which I copied it. The independent search after truth, unfettered by superstition or tradition, the oneness of the entire human race, the pivotal principle and fundamental doctrine of the faith, the basic unity of all religions, the condemnation of all forms of prejudice, whether religious, racial, class, or national, the harmony which must exist between religion and science, the equality of men and women, the two wings on which the bird of humankind is able to soar, the introduction of compulsory education, the adoption of a universal auxiliary language, the abolition of the extremes of wealth and poverty, the institution of a world tribunal for the adjudication of disputes between nations, the exaltation of work performed in the spirit of service to the rank of worship, the glorification of justice as the ruling principle in human society, and of religion as a bulwark for the protection of all peoples and nations, and the establishment of a permanent and universal peace as the supreme goal of all mankind. All these stand out as the essential elements which Baha'u'llah proclaimed. Whereas the principles of Baha'i faith, especially as so clearly articulated by Shoghi Effendi, are easy to understand, the Kitab-i-Aqdas, the holy book of the Baha'i faith, is much more mystical and much more difficult. I have a short passage, actually two short passages, which are copied from the Kitab-i-Aqdas. The authoritative text is available on the Baha'i website. The first one has to do with the duty prescribed by God for his servants is the recognition of him who is the dayspring of his revelation and the fountain of his laws, who represents the Godhead in both the kingdom of his cause, etc., etc. Thus it has been decreed by him who is the source of divine inspiration. This, I believe, is a reference to the role of Baha'u'llah. The second piece which I copied is that they whom God hath endued with insight will readily recognize that the precepts laid down by God constitute the highest means for the maintenance of order in the world and the security of its peoples. And goes on and said, hasten to drink your fill, O men of understanding. They who have violated the covenant of God by breaking his commandments and have turned back on their heels, these have erred grievously in the sight of God, the all-possessing, the Most High. As you may have seen in a previous slide, there is an idea that there are covenant breakers who are to be shunned by the Baha'i. The Baha'i calendar is of some interest. I think it's neat that they have 19 months of 19 days. You do the math, 19 squared is 361. So there are 4 or 5 extra days, which traditionally are more or less lined up with the 26th of February through the 1st of March. The last month of the year goes from the 2nd of March to the 20th of March, and that is the month of daytime fasting. The new year is in March. It's allied with the Spring Equinox. The calendar was locked to the Gregorian calendar until a calendar reform in 2015, and today, in other words, after 2015, it can be independent from the Gregorian calendar. It's tied to the Spring Equinox in Tehran, and it might be a day before or after the Gregorian date of every year. Also, in Islamic countries, the birthdays of the Bab and the Bahaullah were linked to Muharram, to the lunar calendar, and they have preserved something of this in the calendar reform in 2015. The slide shows a very interesting and very pretty floral arrangement of the months with their Persian names and the traditional dates where they begin. Baha'is are required to have a daily obligatory personal prayer. There's various lengths of it. The short form of the prayer is reproduced on the slide. I bear witness, O my God, that you have created me to know you and to worship you. I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to your might, to my poverty and to your wealth. There is no other God but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. There is a longer version of this prayer and a medium version. The short version doesn't really have a specific time. The others do. There are various movements. The Qibla, the direction of prayer, is the shrine of the Bahaullah in Akkar, not the Bab shrine in Haifa. And there are various other things. The devotional prayer has no real set liturgy. Baha'i communities that I am familiar with in this part of the world, in Colorado and Wyoming, meet on a reasonably regular basis, sometimes every week, sometimes once or twice a month, sometimes once or twice a Baha'i month, a 19-day month. And other than the obligatory personal prayer, there really is no set liturgy. Baha'is are not supposed to gamble, or have alcohol, sex outside marriage, gossip. They're not supposed to be involved in partisan politics. I don't think that they prevent Baha'is from voting, but they're not supposed to be involved. I really don't know about the voting. They do encourage useful work. They discourage asceticism, that's rejection of the world. They encourage beauty and harmony. And there is, in Baha'i politics, the governing council of each Baha'i community is a local spiritual assembly, and they make all of the decisions that need to be made in the Baha'i world.